TBA. Together again.
Hello, welcome to Learning the Basics of Bassoon and how to get your double reed class off to a great start. I'm Jennifer Auerbach, and I have with me my colleague, Sally Bohls, and we're going to be talking with you about getting your bassoons off to a great start. So the first thing I want to talk about is selecting kids for the bassoon. If we think about what has to happen with the bassoon, it does tend to be something that has a little bit of a stretch, and so I usually will check the stretch from the thumb to the ring finger, just to make sure they can make that stretch from the bottom thumb key all the way over to either the hole or the key. The great news is that a lot of instruments have a key over here, and so a lot of times they can do that. I don't have particularly large hands, and I make it work, but she does. And that's perfectly fine. And so you can also see that my pinkies are a little bit on the shorter side, and that's fine too. Double jointed is okay. I happen to also be double jointed. Double jointed thumbs are okay. Sometimes people struggle a little bit with moving around on the left-hand thumb keys, but I find that it hasn't been really an issue, so I don't think that should preclude anyone. One of the biggest things that I'm looking for is the underbite. Sometimes we talk about there being an overbite with bassoon, and that embouchure does have a little bit of a overbite where the top lip is a little bit further on than the bottom lip. But it's easy for anybody with pretty average teeth and facial structure to be able to do that. If they have an underbite, that does make it a little bit more difficult, I find. So that might be something that you might want to stay away from. But that's really what I'm looking for when I'm looking for a bassoonist. So let's talk about some first-year goals now. So one of the things that I really want all my students to be able to do is make a great characteristic sound. And it takes a while to be able to do that. Making any sound on the bassoon is pretty easy. So that's not the difficult part of producing the sound, but producing a really nice, clear, consistent sound definitely takes some doing. In addition to that, playing in tune. And so finding that tonal center. And it takes time to be able to do that and to be able to do it properly and well. If we focus too much on that at the beginning, then pinching could happen, and so I really want to make sure we avoid that. But ultimately, if we go back to our air embouchure voicing combination, which we'll talk about throughout our conversation here, they will develop good techniques for having that good tonal center by the end of that first year. I'd also like for them to learn good proper fingerings. I usually don't teach different fingerings than what I want them to do ultimately. And so that means that sometimes I might take a little bit more time to make sure they learn the full fingering for something. E flat is one that comes to mind. And so really vetting those fingerings and making sure you think about that ahead of time. And if you have a lesson teacher, having that conversation with them about E flat, F sharps, things like that, where there is a little bit of variation. The bassoon has a lot more thumb keys than some of the other woodwind instruments, and so we don't quite have the same problem or issue of having to choose different fingerings depending on the scale that we're in quite as much as the others, but it really is important for them to learn the correct fingering so that they can move forward and have facility and not have to go back and redo something. In addition to that, I want them to develop really good half-hole technique, and that can be a challenge as well. I would like them to develop their thumb technique on the left-hand thumb, whether you flick or vent or none of the above. And so I want to make sure that they get really consistent with that. And as far as range goes, it really just depends on your program. In general, they can play down to low B flat, and their upper range really can vary just depending on the program that you're in. And that's one of the things to be aware of as well. So one last thing that happens that you might just want to watch out for is braces. And for bassoon, braces are fine. Most of my students eventually get braces, and it's really not a problem. Mm-hmm. They have to put their lips over their teeth a little bit more, but it's no big deal. So braces, top or bottom, both, no problem at all. And then the next thing I'd like to talk about is reeds. Reeds are a very important part of the equipment that your students are going to need. They'll come often in these tubes when you buy them, but they're really not ideal to store them in the tubes because a lot of times they're wet or moist after playing. And so if you put it in this tube, it probably is going to mold. So it's not the ideal place to store it. It's really important that students will have a reed case. And so you can see that we have this reed case here. There are a couple of different styles. This is called the peg style. You can see Sally has her reed on the peg there. And when you put the reed on the peg, you want to make sure that you put it all the way down so that it's flat in the case. So they should always handle the reed from the string or the glue. That's this bottom part here. And they should put it all the way down so that it's not going to be loose around in the case. This case features also some holes, as you can see, and these holes let things breathe. And there are all different kinds of ways that breathing can happen. I am not a big fan of having those extra humidity packs in the reed cases. Those actually promote moisture and humidity and molding in the reed cases. And so there are a couple of different brands that have those humidity packs in there. And I tend to take those out. So even though that is something for single reeds, generally my point of view is that I would not want to have those in there. And those particular reed cases that come, you might want to find a way to poke some holes in those. Otherwise, molding, I found, can be a real problem. And so that's the peg style. Now there is another style of reed case, and that is called the ribbon style. And you can see here's one here. And so with the ribbon style, we have just little divots here where grooves we can put the reed in. And you can see that one of the things to know, again, it's going to be flat in the reed case. And see how it is really kind of this neck part of the reed that goes between the divots. And I think one of the problems that I've seen, sometimes students will try to put like the string or the glue, they'll try to stick that in between the divots, and it's too bulbous. It's not going to fit. So you want to make sure that it's fitting just as such, and that's really the best way to put it in the ribbon style reed case. And then nice thing about this, you can see there are no holes here or here, but there's some nice air holes here on this wooden case, on that side and on that side, and that's going to help it air out and dry out. So after we play, a lot of times we will just wipe that reed off and just be very delicate with that, maybe blow out the extra water, and then we'll put it in the reed case as dry as it possibly can be. And so that's something about reed cases. So now we'll talk a little bit about some other equipment they need. They should have some sort of soaking container. And so this happens to be a little soaking container. It's Tupperware, and Sally has a nice little medicine bottle, and both of these things work perfectly fine. There's all kinds of different things you can have. With the oboe reed, you only need to soak the little bit of the tip, but with the bassoon reed, we want to soak the whole thing because there's cane that goes all the way up through where the string or the glue is. And so we want to have something that you can fill all the way up with water, and we want to use usually lukewarm water, usually not super cold, usually not super hot, but they need to have some sort of cup here. It's not super necessary that it has a lid, but it's helpful. That way you're not getting wet stuff all over your case. This is helpful but not necessary. It's a little clip that goes on your music stand, and it holds the soaker cup, and that way you're not banging it on your music or on the floor. It's not spilling out. So that's a helpful thing to have, but not really super necessary. But a soaking container, very necessary.
Let me ask real quick, how often do you change your water?
I change the water every day because science experiment. Ooh, absolutely.
Yeah, yuck.
The next thing that we need is a seat strap, and there are a couple of different styles. Some bassoons have a hole at the bottom of the boot, and in that hole you can put this S-hook style seat strap. And so for that, this is just a standard leather. You can get a material one. These are perfectly fine. There's another style of seat strap which is called the cup style, and the cup style can be used on all bassoons. But some bassoons just don't have the holes on the bottom of the boot on that metal part. And so if that's the case, then you can't use the S-hook style seat strap. So then you would have to use the cup style. So the cup is a little bit more universal. I would say just with the cup style, just make sure if it's like this particular kind, it's adjustable. And so it can go all the way in, it can go out a little bit, gives you a little bit of room to be able to be adjustable on that. If it's really tight on the boot cap, sometimes it takes the boot cap with it. So I'm not necessarily pro or anti either one of these. They're great. But just so that you know that those are your options when you're talking about the different kinds of bassoons that are out there. Then there's another set of equipment that they need, which is, it's swabs. And so there are a lot of different kinds of swabs that we use I happen to prefer the silk swab, and this kind has a string and then it has like a chain right here. And I like this kind because I find that the kind with the weight, which is a perfectly fine kind, I'm worried that it's going to bang the inside of the instrument, so I feel a little bit better about this chain version. And then this particular kind of silk swab goes through both the wing and the boot, and those are the two parts that we have to swab. And so I like this kind a lot, and there are a lot of different brands you can get. You'll see these with the newer Fox bassoons. These are the microfiber swabs, and these are great as well. For this, you have one for the boot and one for the wing. And it used to be with the old cotton style that you would accidentally use the one for the boot on the wing and then you get it stuck. And I definitely did that when I was a little kid. But these you can't do it wrong because the weight is a different shape. And so even if you tried to put the boot one in through the wing because it's bigger, it won't go through because it has a little ball that just won't even fit into the bore of the wing joint. So it's a little bit more straightforward if you have to have two. If you have this kind, you only need the one. So either of these are fine. With any swab, you always want to make sure that there are no knots in the swab, and that I certainly tell the students if they get it stuck, they need to stop and try not to force it. There are other swabs that exist. There is a Bohls swab and a Bohls brush, and I would say in the first year you might want to avoid using that. If you really feel strongly about using those are fine. The problem that I sometimes see is that sometimes people have the regular swab and they try to put that through the Bohls, and it very much will get stuck and it could ruin the Bohls. And so I've gone recently into just going ahead and not doing that in the first year and adding that in the second year. And I use the Bohls brush maybe about once a month, Bohls swab once a week. And then also you want to make sure you're cleaning out the Bohls with warm water and soap every once in a while. And that way you can get any debris that's left in there as well. It's not going to harm the Bohls. We don't want to use that on any other part of the instrument, but the Bohls is okay because it's metal and has cork at the base. Those are really the most essential parts of our equipment. Like every other instrument, we want to have a pencil, we want to have a metronome and a tuner and all of that good stuff. But other than that, those are the bassoon-specific equipment that we need. And in a moment, we're going to go on to the next topic. So now we're going to talk about how to build the instruments. So you can see that we have two different kinds of cases here. We have an older style and a newer style. And a lot of times you'll see this kind with the 3 different latches. And so for Sally, she's going to make sure that the bottom part that's closest to the ground, and we're usually going to do this on the ground, but we're going to do it on these chairs so you can see it. This part is going to have to be, that's the wider part, all the way to the ground. And it's really going to be the same thing on this newer style case where the wider part is going to be towards the ground. Otherwise, you're going to dump out the bassoon when you open up the case, which is not advisable. So she's going to start out by undoing the latches, and you can see the latches go out, and then the interior latch just comes up like that. And then on this case, there is a handle that can be together with Velcro, and there's also this clip, and I would definitely recommend having those just as a safety measure. So this one also has zippers, and so I'm going to open that up with the zippers, and we're going to show you what these look like on the inside. And in general, they're in basically the same kind of a way. But I do want to point out one thing that sometimes I do see it done not quite right, which is in this kind of a case, the curly Q part of the boot joint is face down, and there's a divot in the case for it. And in this particular case, you can see there's a place for where a balance hanger would go. This curly Q should actually be facing up. And so that's one of the mistakes that I often see made. So just watch out for that in this particular case, that's how that goes. So just be careful. We have the boot joint, and we have the wing joint, we have the long joint, and then we have the bell. And so I will often have them learn those parts, and then also it's a great idea to snap a picture of the instrument with their phone or their tablet, and that way they can have a picture of that so they know how their instrument goes in their case. That would be something I would recommend to do. So the other thing is that sometimes different books call these parts different things. Sometimes you hear it called the tenor joint and the bass joint, but just so you know that they're referring to these joints here. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take out the boot joint, and we're going to look at the parts of this. You heard me talk about the curly Q. This would be the neck strap hook if we were going to use the neck strap. That's what the function of that is. And you can see on the top we have 2 holes. There's a big hole and a small hole. And then we have the base of it. This is the part we talked about, the seat strap. So if you had an S-hook style seat strap, you'd be putting it here, or the cup would be going here eventually. But we're not going to put that on quite yet. Just want to orient you to the parts of the boot joint. So a lot of times when I'm having people learn how to put this together, we'll have them on the floor, so that's all the way down here. You won't be able to see it, but I would have them super glue this to the floor, pretend, and that way they're not going to lift it up and accidentally have a piece drop. We're going to take out the wing joint next. And so if you look at the wing joint, you're going to see that there's the bottom part of it where you will have either string or cork, and then there's the top part of it, and that's the whisper key. This pad is kind of sticking up just so that you have an idea of what's happening there. On the bassoon, like on the oboe, you want to make sure there's not keys that you're pressing down because you can bend those keys. We don't really have a lot of that happening on the bassoon, but there are some particular ways we want to put the joints in each other. Otherwise, you can bend the keys by touching them to each other. So the first thing you want to do is notice that there's a curve on the wing joint. And so that curve is going to match the curve of the interior of this hole here. So when you put this together, the wing joint is going to go where the cork or the string goes into the smallest hole. We have the curly Q facing you on the boot joint. And so for this, I usually have them hold it on the top of the curve. That's a great place to get leverage. And we're going to make a C all the way around that. And then the left hand is going to make a C on the top of the boot. And so for this, we want to pay attention to make sure that this bridge key lines up with this bridge key. It's going to go over that one. This bridge key goes over that bridge key. And then for the most part, just like Sally had for the oboe, you're going to push more and twist very little. So you can see what I'm not doing is I'm not doing this, because if I did that, I would have keys bumping into each other. So we're definitely not doing a 360. So I'm going to get it lined up. I'm checking this curve against this curve here. And I'm pushing and twisting just a little bit. And so we're going to end up with this curve matching the curve of this hole. This is a little tricky at first, so you want to make sure that you really check that. Another way that you can check it is that on the back, there are 2 little lines on the wing joint and on the boot joint. And those lines, they're little scratches on these plastic instruments. And you will see that those lines should line up. And so you may not have been aware that those lines exist, but those often will line up. Sometimes they don't quite line up, especially if the instrument has been around the block a couple of times. And so if you don't get those to line up exactly on your instrument, but everything goes together properly ultimately, then it might be okay. But you might check that, especially if you have a newer instrument. Now you can see that on Sally's instrument, her wing joint goes all the way in with no problem. This is a brand new instrument, and this wing joint is not quite going in. You can use a lubricant. Some people use cork grease, and some people like to use paraffin wax, and there's you can also use Vaseline. And so any of those are fine. Some people have strong opinions about what to use on what kind of coating on the tenon, but regardless of what you think, you should put some sort of coating on it, and then you might be able to get it closer in. Sometimes you just can't get it in any further, and that's the case here, and so I'm going to go ahead and leave that. But ideally, we're going to get it as close as possible to all the way in. So that's the wing joint into the boot. Now, the next part we're going to take out is the long joint. So the long joint has a larger hole on the top and a smaller hole on the bottom. And then if you look at the back of it, you can see that we have a lot of keys over here. And I think these keys look like hockey sticks. So I call them the hockey stick keys. And so just sort of giving you an idea, we also have a body lock. You may or may not have a body lock. You might even have a body lock that goes a little further down, and that's just a different style. So this body lock should be up right now. If it's down, then you want to make sure it's up before you put it in. And so then we are going to take, we still have that curly Q facing you, and we're going to have the hockey sticks facing us as well. And then we're going to put this straight in like a rocket ship. I'm going to hold it, making a C on the top of the long joint. I'm taking my right hand and making a C on the top of the wing in the middle, top of that curve. And so we're going to go straight in like a rocket ship. And again, we're pushing more than we're twisting. So we're going to try to push that straight in, and we're not going fast, we're not jamming, we're not pressing or banging or anything like that. And then what our goal is that this body lock will go into that hole on the top of the wing joint, if you have that. So then you can lift that off of the little ledge. It probably is spring-loaded, and you want to have that go into the hole. It may have lost its spring, and sometimes this L gets broken off or gets lost. This is very easily replaceable. And then I tend to put this little ledge away from me, but some people put it towards them. I find that it bumps into the bocal a little bit less if it's away from me. And so again, we want to have this going in as much as possible on Sally's instrument. It goes in all the way. On my instrument, it's brand new, and it's not going quite all the way in, but some cork grease will fix that up right up as well. The next part that we're going to take out is the bell. And so on the bell, there's one key. And again, curly Q is still facing you. We're going to take our right hand and put it on the key itself. Left hand is anywhere on the top of the long joint, and you're just going to, again, push more than you twist. We don't need to go twisting all the way around, so push more than you twist. And this one I didn't have any problem, and she's got it all together there as well. So then we have the whole instrument put together minus the bocal. So then we're going to take the bocal out. In this kind of a case, the bocal is underneath the instrument, and it has the little latches. We want to put the latches over it when it's in transit. And then in this kind of a case, the bocals actually go in the exterior pouch that has a logo on it. And you might want to just take a picture of how your bocals go in this pouch, just because there are a couple of little velvet things that hold it in place in the right way. And then we're going to take that out. And this is important. We want to put the left hand on the top of the long joint. The right hand is going to hold the top of the curve. That's because this is a very delicate part of the tip. So we're going to hold the top of the curve, and we're going to have it go straight in. Again, we don't want to go backy-forthy like that. We want to go straight in. I'm doing a little bit of wiggling, and we're going to push that in all the way to the end of the reed well. So just like Sally was saying on the oboe, there's the edge of the well, and this bocal should go all the way in. Now, you'll notice that with Sally's bocal, you don't see very much of the cork, but on mine you can see a little bit more of the cork when the bocal's all the way in. That's okay, that's normal. You may see some cork, you may not, but that is okay as long as it goes all the way in. Bassoon does not adjust pitch by pulling the bocal out or pushing it in. Just like oboe and the oboe reed. So we want to make sure that that goes all the way in, otherwise it's going to create an air pocket. It's going to have some weird tuning issues. So there's only one more part to put together, and that's the reed, but we're going to talk about that in just a moment. Now here you are, your bassoon is put together. So now we're going to talk about disassembling the bassoon safely and swabbing it out. So the first thing that we want to do is we're going to take the bocal off, and we're assuming that the reed is off at this point. And it's very important that they put the left hand on the top of the long joint and the right hand on the top of the curve. If their left hand is somewhere else and it's pressing the whisper key down accidentally, that's how the whisper key pad gets taken off of bassoon. So if you're ever like, why does that whisper key pad just keep getting off? That's why, because they're not watching out for where their hand is when they're disassembling or assembling. So left hand on the top of the long joint, right hand on the top of the curve. Pull more than you twist. Twist just a little bit, pull. And then safely you're going to blow any residue out of your bocal. And then we're going to put that back in the place where the bocal lives. And in Sally's case, we're going to put the little notches over the bocal just to protect it. And then we are going to go on to the next part. So the next part that we take off is going to be the bell. So we'll go in opposite order. The left hand goes on the top of the long joint. It's going to make a C, and the right hand goes on that same key that we talked about before, and we're going to pull more than we twist. We're going to take that off. If you have a wooden instrument and you're trying to take the bell off and it won't come off, usually that's happening with wooden instruments, but it could be a plastic instrument too. I want to show you a trick. You can go holding this on the ground, and with your knee, you're going to go backy, forthy, backy, forthy, backy, forthy. And you might not feel like you're doing very much, but you're dislodging it just enough, and then you should be able to get it off. So that's a trick that you can use. If it's really, really, really stuck and not coming off, then you might need to put it in a cool, dry place for a brief moment of time, just to let it
Contemplate its future.
That's very true. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to disengage the body lock and put it on its little ledge. And then, and if your body lock is here, you'll disengage it there or in the interior. Left hand goes on the top of the long joint, and the right hand is going to go on top of the boot. So make a C on top of the boot. This is a challenging part to get off. And then the problem that I see a lot of people is that they're trying to put their hands in here, and that's a great way to break your tendon. So definitely, I will tell you over the years, the best way to do this, the best way to get leverage is to have your right hand make a C on the top of the boot joint, left hand on the top of the long joint, and the pressure is with left hand up and the right hand down. And both of those have to be doing their job. So we're going to be pulling and twisting and pulling and twisting and pulling and twisting, and this is pushing and pushing, 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 and then it's going to come out straight like a rocket ship. I always want to make sure that they have an opportunity to do this successfully, and if not, I'll show them and then put it back together and let them do it, because it can be kind of nerve-wracking when they're on their own at their house and you're not there to help get it apart. So this next part should be pretty straightforward. Left hand, make a C on the top of the boot. Right hand, make a C on top of the curve of the wing joint. And we're pulling more than we're twisting, but we're twisting just a little bit, and that should come out. This I'm pushing down. This goes back into the case where the thumb keys are meeting the thumb keys of the other part, the long joint. And then you might have a blue cloth, and that can be put in between the wing and the long, just to protect them from bumping against each other. And then again, the boot joint, it's ready to go back in, but we are going to swab it. So there are two parts that we want to make sure we swab every single time, every day, not just on every other day, not just on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We're going to do it every time we play. So we're going to talk about the swab, just like on the oval swab. We're going to make sure there are no knots anywhere, because that can equal getting it stuck, which we don't want to do. And so we've got the chain, and on the boot joint, we're going to do this first, because even though on these plastic instruments, it doesn't really super duper matter, on wooden instruments, we have a lined joint and an unlined joint. And so it would be ideal for us to drag the dry swab through the unlined joint versus a wet swab through the unlined joint. So that's why you would do the boot joint first. So we're going to take and look at the big hole, and we're going to take the chain and put it down the big hole. And you're going to hear and feel that it's at the bottom. Now, one thing to note is, and I will show you this, and I don't have them do this, but I do show it to them, that there's a U-tube here, and we have to get that chain to go through all the way around the U-tube. And that can be a little bit of a challenge. So we're going to have it all the way down so that it can't go down anymore. You're going to take your right hand thumb, and you're going to hold that string in the interior of the big hole. And then we're holding it at an angle, and we are going to shake, and shake, 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 and then we're gonna really quickly turn it upside down. Oh, you got it on the first try.
Gold star.
Gold star. I didn't. So
Who knew?
I'm gonna try it again. So
Can I just pull this all the way out?
you just pull it all the way out. And if it gets stuck on something, stop and have somebody help you, rather than getting it stuck or trying to cut it out. All right, I've redeemed myself. I've got it to go all the way through. I'm going to slowly pull it all the way through, and then I've swabbed the boot joint. The next joint that we need to swab is going to be the wing joint. The other parts don't get swabbed because the moisture doesn't go up to the long joint and the bell. So just so you know, it's just these two parts. Then we've got the smaller hole where the whisper keypad is, and we have the larger hole where the cork or the string is. Now, the thing is that you can do it either way, but I like to do it where you're putting it in the small hole first. The reason that is that if it's going to get stuck, it'll get stuck sooner, and it'll be easier to get out. So it's always about having a plan B. So this part is a lot easier to swab. You're just gonna have that chain go through, and you see it's come through on the other end. And so we're going to very, very slowly pull that through. Now, if you're going really fast through this, it's really easy for this to kind of fly through things or maybe even take the whisper key pad off with it. So you just want to go slow and pull that through. And then we can put the wing joint back. And that is the conclusion of swabbing the instrument. And then, of course, when we're closing the case up, you have all these wonderful little pockets where you can put things. And so then we're going to make sure that we remember to put our seat strap in here, because that's a rite of passage, is forgetting your seat strap in any number of places. So we want to make sure we put our seat strap and our reeds and all that stuff in there. We've probably dumped our water out because we want to make sure we're getting fresh water each day. We're going to close the case up, and in Sally's case, she's going to latch that up. Latch, latch, latch. There are 3 of those. I'm going to zip this up, and I'm going to go zip, and then I'm going to clip, and then I'm going to Velcro. Zip, clip, and Velcro. I'm going to make sure that my boat home pouch is also zipped, otherwise this will fall open. And then that is really what there is to know about putting your instrument in its case and being safe and taking care of it on a daily basis. All right, now it's time for us to talk about breathing, blowing, embouchure, and making that first sound. So the first thing that we have to talk about is how to use our breath. And it's very important to have strong, firm, fast air. So when we're sitting in our chair, it doesn't matter where you're sitting. You can be sitting towards the front, towards the back, just as long as our back isn't leaning back on the back of the chair and we're not slunched over in any kind of way. We want to be sitting in a comfortable L, just like most of the other instruments. So we want to make sure that our shoulders are not tight or tense, that our neck is not doing any of that stuff. And we'll have a lot more to talk about with posture, but this is fine to be talking about when you're doing the initial breathing and blowing. We have our core muscles, and these muscles engage the air through the lungs in a firm, fast way. And so we want to make sure that we're aware of these muscles. And so what I like to do is just take a nice deep breath in and then blow it out with a hiss. And you can do that kind of exercise just as you do it with any of the other winds or brass in your classes. So that's something to be aware of as well. Now, let's talk a little bit about embouchure. So if we take our reed, we're gonna need to soak the reed. Our reed has an inside and an outside rather than a top and a bottom like the single reeds do. And so we must soak it in water. And I would say that about 3 minutes is a great amount of time. And you can see really well on Sally's container that she has it almost all the way filled up. So is mine. And so she was holding it from the glue or the string, and you just put it gently down in the water tip first. So you're going to put it in there, and it's going to soak for about 3 minutes. Probably longer than that. It's going to start to get a little bit waterlogged. It's going to start to be a little bit harder to blow into. 10 minutes, that's kind of a long time. I would never close this up. I actually would never close it up with the reed on it or in it, because then I think there's a very easy way to just accidentally put it in your case and forget that it's in there. Overnight soaking, it's probably going to be very hard. It's going to be waterlogged, and it's going to decrease its lifespan. So 3 minutes is a great ideal time. We want lukewarm water. It doesn't have to be super hot, preferably not super cold. So we have that 3 minutes in there. We're going to take that out of the water, and you can see that it's pretty wet, and so we're going to put our water down, and we're going to just gently, without lots of air, we're just going to gently blow the excess water out and just take that off just so that it's not getting in our way. And so now we've got the reed, and we talked about the different parts. We've got the tip, we've got the string or the glue, and the tip is going to go inside of the mouth. So what will happen is our lips go over our teeth, and that's one of the things that will happen. So we want to make sure that their lips are not all the way in. So we talk about granny lips. We do not want granny lips where you can't see any of the red. You want to see about half of the red of the lips. And everybody's physique is a little bit different, but that's generally a good rule of thumb. So the first thing that I have them do is I orient them to some of the other parts of the reed. We've got several wires. We have the first wire that's in the front, it's closest to the tip, and we've got the second wire, And then we do have a third wire that's hiding under the string or the glue, and some people have a fourth wire. But we want this first wire to be a good orientation for us, and you can take the pinky and put it just the tip of the pinky right ahead of that wire, and that's a good way of knowing how much reed goes inside of the mouth, so you can do the pinky test. It's about half of the blade of the reed. Sometimes people do different ways, but that's a good way to perceive how much reed goes inside of your mouth. So then the next thing is that we want to take the right shape of embouchure. So a lot of times what people will do is they'll, their corners aren't quite forward enough. They go back and they're smiling. But we want to make sure that the corners are forward, just like on the oboe. So I have them do this really cool thing, which is very successful. I have them say the word how and breathe in. You can almost not help but make the right embouchure if you do that. We'll do it again. See, the lips go over the teeth. And then we're going to take the reed and we're going to go straight in. So with some of the other instruments, we're going at an angle, but we're never going to go at any kind of angle. We're going to go straight in. So we're going to do how and breathe in. We've got our pinky test, and then we're going to go about halfway onto that blade. And I'm going to show you what that looks like. So it's going to go straight in like that. I always have them hold on to the string or the glue. So what I'm not going to have them do is go, because then it's going to do whatever angle it's going to do. So we want to make sure we're replicating that angle that it would be on the instrument. So we'll do that one more time, how and breathe in, and then we're just going to blow and hold it out for a long time. All right, so when we breathe, we'll breathe from the bottom lip. We set our top lip and we let go. So we're going to try that now. We're going to set it and we're going to breathe from the bottom lip. All right, and then the next thing that we're going to talk about is the tonguing and articulation. So just like on the oboe, we want to touch the tip of the tongue to the tip of the reed. Now, in the anatomy of the inside of your instrument, of your mouth rather, your tongue doesn't go straight like this. It's going to come like this kind of an angle. And so what's important to know is that it's not the underside of the tongue, and it's not really far onto the tongue where that happens. It's generally the tip of the tongue touching the tip of the reed. If you're switching somebody over from another instrument, sometimes they tell me that this feels sharp to them because on the single reed instruments, you're not necessarily always quite touching the tip of the reed or the reeded mouthpiece with the tip of the tongue. So that does feel a little bit different. Or if you're a single reed player, that might feel different to you. So just so you know, it might feel sharp. Now at the point where your tongue is bleeding, then that is too sharp. But usually it's just something to get used to. So we're going to touch the tip of the tongue to the tip of the reed. And we're going to go two, 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 two. And we're not going to actually make any sound. We're just going to go two, 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 two. Two, 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 two. Now, our air needs to keep going continuously. And so that's a whole separate apparatus. So your air is blowing while you're doing two, 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 two. So now we're going to put those pieces together. We're going to do the air keeps going and two, 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 two. Here we go. All right. And just like Sally was talking about with the example of the water faucet, so we wouldn't turn the water faucet on and go on, off, on, off, on, off. We would have the water coming out and we would simply interrupt the flow of the water with the finger. That's a good analogy to think about. And these kinds of tips really help them develop that good tonguing. Faster tonguing seems to be a little bit easier for them to grasp onto, and I will have them do this as an exercise just orally, where I'll have them just do as fast tonguing as they want. So and they may not be able to go that fast, and they probably won't go controlled, but at least they get the idea of the fact that their air has to be continuous rather than. So there were many things wrong about that. First of all, we don't need to be moving when we're playing a different note. The second thing is we don't need new air for each note. This happens on most instruments as they're getting used to it, but that's one way that you can solve that as well. The next thing that I like to do is grab the bocal, and do a couple of reed and vocal exercises. Sometimes people call this the vocal phone. And so we're gonna, as always, hold from the string or the glue, so we're never gonna hold from the tip of the reed. And we're going to put it straight onto the vocal. We're not gonna twist it all the way around, just like the other joints. We're gonna push it more and twist very little, just a tiny, tiny bit. I have the left hand on the cork of the vocal and the right hand on the glue of the reed or the string. And then we're gonna do some playing on this as the mouthpiece. And when we put this in the mouth, it's just the same as we did the embouchure with the reed, but it's important that when we do this, that it's going to be the vocal, the bump of the vocal is at eye level. And so you can see that really well with us here. So we're going to do all those same things. We're going to do how I'm breathing. We're going to have our pinky test right here. We're going to breathe from our bottom lip, and we're going to tongue, and we're just going to hold the note for a long time. Very good. Let's do 5 in a row. We'll tongue all of those notes. And so these are some great exercises you can do. You can certainly do some aural back and forth with them, but that's a great exercise just to get them going where they don't have the whole instrument together. They're not trying to worry about hand position and posture, but they're getting air through a little bit more of the instrument. So now, in just a moment, we're going to put the whole instrument together and make our sound on our instrument. So now we're going to talk about what you need to do to put your instrument down when you're at rest, and also how to carry it safely. So the first thing that has to happen when you need to put your instrument down is you must take the reed off. That is really important. Reeds are very delicate. We want to make sure they don't get broken. So you want to put it in a safe place. And then the next thing is, I would never leave my vocal on when I would lay my instrument down. So I want to make sure I safely take the vocal out. And then you can have them do any number of things. You can have them put it on the chair. You can have it put it under the chair. I'm going to put it under my chair for now, and then I'm going to take my instrument, and it's really way too big, too long to put just over a chair. It's probably going to get knocked. So we're going to put it on the ground, and you can put it any number of ways, but I recommend putting it so that it's sort of like tall like this, where the side of it that has the bell is actually on the ground and the wing is like up. And the reason I do this is that way the keys are not going to get bent or smushed. Also, that's the direction of the tone holes, and that moisture can go onto pads, and so it's preferable to avoid that. So this is how I'm going to put it on the ground, imagining that my hand is the ground here. That's how I would put it down, and I wouldn't put it on chairs. I would never, ever lean it up against a chair and walk away. Ooh, instant heart attack right there. And I would never lean it against a wall, freeform. If this was a wall, I wouldn't just like lean it like that. That's an invitation for it to fall. And so then you've got banged keys, and that's no fun at all. So the other thing to know is that about putting it in a corner of a room. So I will tell you that I am okay with it going into a corner. If there's a corner of the room and the room is carpeted, if the room is not carpeted, I'm not okay with that. And if you just want to skirt that issue and just say, I never want to have them ever do that because I don't want them to have to worry about whether there's carpet or regular concrete, then just don't ever have them do that and just have them put it on the ground like that. It's the safest place for it to be, and you don't have to worry. And then that brings us to the next point, which is how to walk with your instrument. Let's say we're walking on the stage. We're walking off the stage. We're walking from one place to another. I would not walk with the bohol in like that. I would have the reed out, and I would have the bohol out. And there are a couple of places you'll see people doing it. You sometimes see people putting the bohol in the wing joint like that, and I don't recommend that because it's not safe for the bohol. It could get banged up. Also, especially in a wooden instrument, but even in the plastic, it'll scratch up the interior. And so I don't advise that. I'll have them put with the tip of the bohol down into the bell. And it does make noise there, but it's going to be much safer for it. They should not put this part in the bell. Sometimes I see that mistake being made, especially at first, and that will just fall out. Or they could just carry it. And so that's another possibility. But we'll go ahead and put it in the bell. And this is critically important for anytime they're walking with it, or even when they're putting it on their seat strap. So the hand position when you're carrying or picking it up, left hand in the middle of the wing and the long, right hand goes on the top of the boot. And we're making 2 C's. So we don't need to be like holding it like this. That's not a great way to have that best leverage. We want to have one hand in the middle and one hand on that boot joint. Because if you lift it up from the middle without that, it could be that these joints are loose and the boot joint is going to fall. Even worse, lifting it up from the bell. Yikes, that is an invitation for disaster. You definitely want to make sure they're not just lifting it up from the bell. And so left hand in the middle of the wing and the long, right hand on the top of the boot. That's also going to hold true for when we put it on the seat strap, just so you know. So these are the best ways to hold your instrument and walk with it. And in just a moment, we're going to talk about the seat strap and some positioning. Now it's time for us to put the seat strap on the chair and put the bassoon together and make our first sounds. So we know that there's the S hook, or there could be the cup, but we're going to put this on the chair. And so I have them do this separately. I don't have them put it on the bassoon. We're going to put it in the center. We're going to have it centered in the front of the chair. I'm going to show you what that looks like. It's just at the tip of the chair, and it's straight. It's straight. It's not angled, and that's a very important thing to note, that it is not angled. It's about centered there, and the hook or the cup is leaning off the right side. So then we're going to sit ourselves down on it, and both Sally and I are grown adults, and we have no trouble keeping this seat strap down, but your little kiddos might. And so there are a couple of strategies that you can use. You can certainly have them pull that through their leg and wrap it around their thigh. That sometimes helps to keep it down. You can certainly get a little clamp and put it on the other side of the chair. Or that rubbery stuff that goes into drawers that I sometimes see them using with some of the low brass as well. You can put that on the chair, and it'll help things avoid slipping around. Otherwise, sometimes the seat strap falls. And so, definitely. So now we're going to take the instrument. It's all together. We're holding it 2 hands, and it's all together except for the reed. So we haven't put the reed on quite yet. And I'm going to have them, still with those hands, we're going to have it rest on their right leg so that the boot is on their right leg. Then we're going to take our right hand off because we've got it angled, and we're going to look and grab that S hook, and we're going to put it in the hole that's closest to the ground. You also notice that the bow hole is facing towards you, and we see that these tubes are making a parallel situation to our body. And so we want to make sure that all this stuff isn't curved around. We want to make sure that the bow hole isn't curved, and we'll be nuancing that as we get even further into things. So one of the questions I get is, which hole are they supposed to use? Because there are 2 holes here, and it's the one that is closest to the ground, or it's to the left when you're looking at it in the back. So it's to the left when you're looking at it. That's the hole to use. If it's confusing, you can put a piece of tape over the wrong hole. So we'll have that there, and we're looking at it. And I like to do it this way rather than putting it on first and then sitting on it, because it's a little harder to maneuver it and put it in just the right spot of the chair, and it makes a really big difference with the positioning. So now we're going to grab our reed. We're holding it from the string or the glue, and we're going to put it straight on. We want it to go straight in the mouth, and so it's not straight on the bow hole like it was before, because if it was, we'd have to turn our neck, and we don't want to do that. So it's turned just a little bit, but it's still going to go straight into our mouth that way. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I'm still in that same comfortable L. And so here I am in that comfortable L. I'm going to bring the bassoon to me so that we're making about a 45-degree angle. And the problem that you can see right off the bat is that the reed is going to my nose.
And mine's going to my chin.
And hers is going to her chin. So neither of these things are going to work. If I was going to play this the way it is, I'd have to raise my neck, and she would have to lower her neck. And we don't want to have to do that. The other thing I could do is I could lean over a lot like this. And I don't want to do that either. I'm disturbing the free flow of air and the general positioning of my hands that I'm going to talk about as well. So we want to make sure that we get this positioning correct first. So how can we adjust that? I'm going to adjust mine first, and I'm going to adjust Sally's next. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to, if it's too high, put the left hand in the middle of the wing and the long, the right hand on the seat strap, knees to the ceiling, and pull it down. And then I'm going to check and see, okay, does it go straight into my mouth? It does. It does. Now let's fix Sally's problem. Hers is too low. It's going to her chin. So she's going to do the opposite. She's going to have her right hand on the boot, and then she's going to have her left hand on the seat strap, knees to the ceiling, pull it, and then knees down, and then she's going to check that and see if it goes straight to her mouth. It does, and so she's all set. And now it's time for us to talk about hand position. So just like on the other woodwind instruments, the left hand goes on the top part of our instrument and the right hand goes on the bottom. We talked about making the comfortable C, so we're going to do that with both of our hands. We'll make a comfortable C. Sometimes talk a little bit about hamburger hands. So we want to have these fingers that are comfortable. We don't want to dig them in and get it into the hamburger bun. So that's the comfortable C, and we're going to transfer that to both parts of the instrument. I spend a little bit more time on this, but I am going to go through it a little quickly just for the sake of time. And so just showing you where those fingerings go. Sally's going to stay with hers on, but I'm going to take it off so that you can see it. So on the left top hand here, we have the fingers in the front are going to go hole. We're going to skip over that sliver to another hole. And you're either going to go to the pear-shaped key or another hole. The pinky is going to hover over these pinky keys. And on the back, the left-hand thumb is going to go on the bottom button, and that is the whisper key. So that's where everything is going to comfortably rest. Those are the home keys or holes. On the right hand, it's a little harder to see on the plastic instruments, but there's a hole here. And so they'll often skip that because they don't see it on these kinds. So their finger is going to go on the hole, that index finger, finger number 1. It's not going to go on that key. They're going to skip over this key and go to the next hole. So hole, hole. They're going to skip over the sliver key if they have it. Some instruments don't. They're going to go to the big raindrop key with the third finger. Then on the pinky, we have this set of keys, and we're going to hang out on the square key that's the closest one. And then we're going to create a home key on the back. We have some thumb keys. You might have 3, you might have 4. This instrument has 4. We're going to hang out on the largest one. That's called the pancake key. So that's going to be your home key. Now we have 10 keys and 10 fingers, and we are pressing all of those keys or holes. And we're going to press all of those down. I'm going to re-engage my seat strap here. And I have them squeeze and release. When they release, that's a little bit nerve-wracking because you might say, well, it's going to fall. But the balance points are the bases of both index fingers. And so you can hold the instrument up from falling with the base of both index fingers. And so you have them do that as an exercise. And our fingers, just like all the other woodwinds, we don't want to have flyaway fingers or thumbs and thumbs moving up into different places where they shouldn't be. We want to keep those hovering over those home keys and holes. You do a lot of squeeze and release just to get them used to that. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and do our very first note. We did G on the oboe. We're going to do C on the bassoon. So we have the thumb on that whisper key. We have 1, 2, 3. We're going to do all that stuff we did with the embouchure. We're going to do our pinky test. We're going to rehome our bottom lip. We're going to tongue. And we're going to play a very long note. All right, ready? And that was a C. Now, that is the start of a very long journey. There is a lot to do, but that's a very good start on the bassoon, and I hope that you enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for attending.